Ladies and gentlemen, let me just welcome every one of you to this our webinar series, the Jamaica Olympic Association. I'm Dalton Myers, and I'm going to be your moderator for this afternoon. I have a very good set of panelists here with me. I'll tell a little bit about them in a few, but the Jamaica Olympic Association is committed towards supporting our athletes and our officials as we aim to get to Tokyo 2021. Now, we thought this would be a very good opportunity to start informing members, different stakeholders about some of what is happening at the Jamaica Olympic Association, as well as just to give you an idea of where we hope to go, and also hear from athletes, officials, etc. And then we thought that we'd drop in there to have something about athletes and their finances, etc. So welcome wherever you are. If you're like Danushan here in the UK, it is late evening there, and I want to thank you for joining us. If you're in the Caribbean, again, a pleasant afternoon to you, and welcome to our first in the webinar series. So for this webinar, our panelists will speak for 15 to 20 minutes each, and after the final presentation, we'll be having question and answer. So we'll be taking your feedback. You can also put some questions in the chat, and I'm sure our panelists will answer. And just in case they can't, we'll be sure to provide a response in due course. We may have a slight adjustment where one and two panelists may be in and out because of other appointments, but we'll try to get through everything for you. So again, welcome. I'm Dalton Myers. I'm the corporate planner here at the Jamaica Olympic Association and the moderator for this webinar. Now, our first panelist is no stranger to sports in the Caribbean and certainly in Jamaica. He's Christopher Samuda, who is the president of the Jamaica Olympic Association and also president of the Jamaica Paralympic Association. Just in case you didn't know, Mr. Samuda is also on several boards here in Jamaica, regionally and internationally, whether it is sports or law, etc. He's a lawyer by profession, but certainly he is the man in charge of guiding the policy framework, etc., from the Jamaica NOC. So, Mr. Samuda, I know you're here. I know you're rearing to go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let's welcome the president, Christopher Samuda. Mr. Samuda, if you're there, over to you. I think your mic is still muted, if you don't mind. I know you want to get going, so just on mute and...
You're hearing me now?
Perfectly well. Go ahead, sir.
Fine. Thank you very much, Dalton. And good afternoon to your viewers and good morning, depending on where you are in the geographical space. I thought this afternoon, and I'm speaking in the context of Jamaica, that we will look at leadership and the change in dynamics. And in order to look at the change in dynamics, I do believe that we're going to have to look first at the types of leadership. The first type of leadership that I would want us to look at is the servant leadership. And this is, of course, serving the organization, serving the association, which differs dramatically from traditional leadership, where the main focus is on the performance of the organization. Then we have ethical leadership, and I think that is self-explanatory, governed by the respect for ethical beliefs and values and for the dignity and rights of others. It entails concepts such as equity, fairness, trust, honesty, conscience, and consciousness. Then we have corporate leadership, which relates primarily to governance, which essentially involves managing and balancing the interests of many stakeholders within an organization or team, as well as ensuring compliance with best practices and governing statutes, rules, regulations, and policies. Then team members, we have business leadership. Business leadership involves decision-making, goal reaching, and the exercise of authority in a commercial context or environment, and assumes many forms, but it normally involves persons who are at the hierarchy of an organization or sport organization, i.e. the president, the secretary general, CEO, directors, and chef de mission. Then we have intuitive leadership. Intuitive leadership recognizes that leaders are only a part of the whole organization, just one star in the constellation, and it embodies deep sensitivity, which enables leaders to provide support and encouragement for team members and stakeholders, and to establish an umbilical connection with them that brings out the innovative best in team members in a secure and inspiring environment. Then we have logistic leadership. Logistics leadership involves an ability to monitor all logistics-related activities of a team or association or organization, while exhorting team members, encouraging team members to deliver optimal results and to continuously develop innovative solutions to team and organizational challenges. Ecumenical leadership, which is something that has just emerged recently in literature on leadership. Ecumenical leadership recognizes the importance and value of representing the collective whole, the entire team or organization, and all stakeholders in promoting unity, mutuality, cooperation, and brotherhood. And then my thoughts went to culture leadership, or what I termed on another occasion, yard leadership. Yard or cultural leadership establishes, reinforces, or validates the integrity of norms and behaviors within a culture or organization, and engages persons who will create or embody that culture, or it ingests and invests in ideologies or philosophies that promote that culture. So those are the types of leadership that I want us to reflect on in our conversation this afternoon. Servant leadership, serving the organization. Ethical leadership, embodying the ethics of fairness, equity, cooperation. Corporate leadership, which of course essentially balances the interest of stakeholders and team members in the organization while securing compliance with laws, regulations, policies, and statutes. Business leadership, decision-making, goal-reaching, and the exercise of authority in a commercial or context or environment. We have intuitive leadership, as I indicated to you. You're part of a whole organization. And then we have logistic leadership, where you look and monitor at all logistic-related matters of the team, of the organization, while encouraging team members to produce optimally, to perform optimally. Ecumenical leadership, the importance and value of representing the whole organization, not just part of the organization, the entire organization. And then finally, as I had indicated previously, culture and yard leadership. So those are the types of leadership that you will find in any organization, whether it is corporate, whether it is sport. And it is a marriage of these types of leadership that will dictate the well-being or otherwise of an organization. So having looked at the types of leadership, let us now look at the dynamics that we are facing as leaders in our respective organizations, as leaders in our respective endeavors, to see how best that we can use those types of leadership, the policies of those leaderships, the culture of those leaderships, in order to meet the change in the dynamics. So let us look at the dynamics. We know that sport is evolving as a business. More than ever now, sport is a business. And I'm contextualizing it in sport as a business, because this is in fact a webinar that is primarily dealing with sport. The monetization of sport, the commercialization of sport, the proprietary rights of sport. I own my face. I own my creative thoughts and work. I own my future. There has been in the last 10, 15, 20 years, a very robust response in sport and in other endeavors to proprietary rights. And this is a dynamic that leaders are going to have to face in respective organizations. How do we manage the evolving business of sport in that context? And then we have social media revolution. There's a social media revolution in sport. How do we manage the viral of sport? How do we socialize and humanize the messages in sport? How do we use a medium social media as an instrument of social re-engineering of sport. And in the last 2-3 decades, this has, of course, been a very concern of many organizations. How do you manage social media to ensure that the brand integrity is preserved, that the branding value of your organization is preserved? Then we have, of course, as a dynamic in sport, particularly the audible voices of the fan base of sport. Technology team members has given a voice to the voiceless in sport, and indeed more talk to the talker in sport. Social media platforms have revolutionized the voice of fan base. They have more access to knowledge, more access to information, and therefore they have now more informed opinions. And that is a dynamic in the sport arena and in other arenas that we have to face as leaders, how best we manage without circumscribing, of course, the right to speech. Technology has created, in terms of the voice of the fan base, a far more sophisticated fan base. Access to knowledge, access to information. They are able, in a moment's notice, to put their hands on information that will inform opinions of them in terms of leadership, the types of leadership, the performance of the organization, sport organization, the very, very protocols of the organization. Then, as a dynamic, we have the growing governance of sport. I have never seen in the last perhaps 10 or 20 years, there being so much concern in relation to establishing the governance framework in sport and also in private sector organizations. Sport has become very regulated, my friends, exceptionally regulated. There are far more watchdog supervisory bodies that we had before. There's also the response to the times that we're living in, regrettably. There is a lot of indiscretion, a lot of acts of, should I say, criminality. And this, of course, is an evolving dynamic that leadership is going to have to address, to curtail, to ensure the integrity of the organization. And then as part of the evolving dynamic of governance, you have concepts of transparency and accountability in sport that have become very critical in terms of corporate governance and how the organization is perceived. Then we can't forget, as a dynamic in the environment, science, the discoveries of science. Science has marched so aggressively in the last half a century in terms of sport science, in terms of knowledge of sport kinetics and analytics, that subjectivity is becoming very less nowadays. There are very few errors that are being made now. And that is as a result of science maturing and, of course, affecting the operations of sport. So we have that as a dynamic, science evolving, and how do leaders, particularly, and I break down leaders not only in terms of presidents and secretary generals, but coaches and managers are in and of themselves leaders. How do they deal with the evolving medical sciences and sports sciences? Then coming closer to our experience today, we have the rights revolution in sport as a dynamic. Choose to challenge, which was the theme of the International Women's Day recently. Black Lives Matter, which has figured very prominently in the political arena, in the social and racial arena, but it has also affected the arena of sport. How do leaders, using the instruments that they have, be able to deal with the rights revolution in sport? And then we have, of course, save the environment in sport. These are just three dynamics in terms of the revolution of sport that we perhaps will look at this afternoon. And then coming far more closer to home, we have the globe-trotting pandemic, which is a dynamic that has confronted us, from which we should learn some critical lessons. As one author had phrased it, it has become the virus of all viruses, the disease of all diseases, and the plagues of all plagues. How do we deal with the dynamics in that environment? So just to go over for clarity and just to jog your memory, the dynamics that we face, the evolving business of sport. We face the social media revolution in sport. We face the audible voices of a fan base in sport. We face the growing governance in sport. We face the discoveries of sciences of sport. We face the rights revolution of and in sport. And then we face the globe-trotting pandemic, which has, of course, affected universally peoples of the world. Those are the dynamics that leadership will have to now challenge and contextualize in the interest of the organization. And I propose, if looking at the evolving business of sport, who are the leaders that are responsible for those dynamics? Business leadership. We go back to business leadership that we treat with the evolving business of sport. The evolving business of sport also entails ethical leadership, the ethics of business, recognizing the right of persons to own their face and not breaching those rights. It also involves servant leadership. We serve in business to ensure that the business is meeting the human objectives first, the human objectives, the human capital objectives, and thereafter the performance indicators. If we look at the social media revolution in sport, what are the types of business that immediately, types of leadership that immediately come to mind? Ethical leadership. The message in social media, we have to control as leaders to ensure that it abides with ethical governance of the organization, that it does not breach any norms, any social etiquette. Come to mind as well in terms of social media revolution is intuitive leadership. How do you intuitively control the message in the social arena, which is viral, without, of course, compromising the principles of right to speech and proprietary rights of creative works? Then you have the cultural leadership that can, of course, treat the social media revolution as well. Those norms that we're accustomed to as a society, as a people, as an organization, as a sport organization, we must bring to bear on how we control the narrative, the dialogue in social media. The audible voices of the fan base, which is a dynamic that we have to face. What types of leadership that we will bring to bear on that in order to ensure the will of the organization? Business leadership comes to mind immediately. Business leadership, ecumenical leadership. We are part of a whole. We normally in sport forget the importance and value of the fans. And ecumenical leadership reinforces the fact that we are simply a part of a whole. We are one of a proliferation of stakeholders in sport. Then cultural leadership, we can bring to bear on audible voices of the fan base. How can we instill in stakeholders cultural values so that social media will reflect those values? Then if we look at, for instance, the discovery of science, what types of leadership, which we have discussed or had a conversation on previously, that we can use in order to create a situation where science not only lends an advantage to sport and lends an advantage to human being, but is seen also as an expression of the competence, expression of the capacity of the human beings. Immediately, intuitive leadership comes to play in terms of the discovery of the sciences as well. How do we control, how do we empower knowledge? And that is intuitive leadership. How do we empower knowledge through the medical sciences for the good of the organization? How do we increase objectivity of science without compromising that human element, the art, rather than the science of leadership? Then if we think of the rights revolution in terms of the types of leadership that we can use in order to influence the rights revolution, corporate leadership, decision-making. Now we know that, for instance, recently, there has been a lot of debate globally in terms of the expression of rights at sport events. How do we use the corporate governance framework of sport in order to give effect to that expression? but without compromising the product, which is the games. How do we use corporate leadership? How do we use servant leadership? How do we telegraph and communicate to those who are expressing the rights that we are serving the rights, that we are genuinely serving the rights, but that we have to contextualize the expression of the rights to ensure that there are no adverse consequences for the event, for the organization. And then, of course, the rights revolution also entails ethical leadership. Ethical leadership. You cannot silence Black Lives Matter in sport. It's a reality. It's a reality. And to do otherwise may engage in leadership, which is not ethical. Then we have to look at the environment, save the environment, which is, of course, part of ethical leadership as well. So we come now to globe-trotting pandemic. And this is facing us very firmly in the face. How do we use the instruments of leadership in treating the pandemic? We come back to corporate leadership. And there are critical lessons that we have to learn from the dynamics of this pandemic. As a sport organization, we have to learn how can we rather insulate ourselves from a pandemic? Must we look at our corporate structure in terms of our risk policies? Must we look at our policies to ensure that when the pandemic occurs, the organization has the flexibility and the ingenuity to respond to stakeholders' needs, and we are not caught flat-footed? How do we use corporate leadership in this pandemic to telegraph or inspire the organization, to inspire stakeholders to say that this is something that we are confronting as a collective unit, but we are not negotiating with defeat? How do we use servant leadership in this respect? We serve, and therefore we must lead by example. So any lessons to be learned, any solutions to this, as leaders, we must lead by example. And then, of course, we have the business leadership, of course. We know that the pandemic has affected, very much so, organizations and economies. How do we use the profile, the stature of business leadership in order to insulate the organization from risk? So we have to look at our business model to ensure that it's not perforated when the pandemic occurs, that it's able to withstand the pandemic. And that is a leadership instrument that we can use to certainly minimize, if not attenuate, the pandemic. And then, of course, we have to look at ecumenical leadership in the pandemic. We are a part of the whole. Quite arguable, the pandemic has given rise to individualism. And we must use ecumenical leadership as a determinant to indicate to stakeholders that we are all in this together. We are all in this together, and therefore leadership must look at the whole and not individualize the constituency of stakeholders, but look to the welfare of the entire body. So those are my thoughts, team members, in relation to leadership and the change in dynamics. We are living in a world where the dynamics now at play are complex, but they are not beyond human understanding and not beyond human solution. And as I've indicated in many fora, we must never negotiate with defeat. So the road to Tokyo and the road beyond Tokyo is a journey of many travelers, and leadership in responding to changing dynamics must give fellow pilgrims not only a clear vision of the mission and destination, but importantly, leadership must give a sense of the destiny, a sense of destiny that inspires mutual trust, integrity, confidence, optimal performance, individual and collective responsibility, and indeed coming closer to home, sportsmanship. Leadership and the changing dynamics is a topic that is not only for leaders at the head of the organizational chart, but a manager, a coach, an athlete is a leader. And we must understand that the profile of leadership goes straight down the organizational chart. And if we are to treat successfully the dynamics, the changing dynamics of the global village, we must seek not only to be leaders who are servants, leaders who are ethical, leaders who are corporate, leaders who have business acumen and a strategy, leaders who are intuitive, leaders who have logistic expertise and competencies, leaders who are ecumenical in vision, and leaders who exhibit that homegrown yard values, cultural values that can inform the organization. I thank you for listening, and I thank the Joey for the privilege of sharing my thoughts on leadership and the changing dynamics. And I hope that you have been fertilized and that it will lead to a very robust discussion after this. Thank you very much, Dalton.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Sumwood. I really appreciate those feedback. Listen, if you have any questions, there is the Q&A section or there's a chat. You can post those.
Yes.
And Mr. Sumwood will be here for a while to answer all of your questions, as a matter of fact. Some very good points there. Also, I thought I would mention that some of us are on YouTube, some are in Zoom. Wherever you are, welcome to this webinar. If you're just joining us, I'm Dalton Myers, I'm your moderator. Also, somewhere there is CEO and Secretary General, Mr. Ryan Foster. He's there also. We're going to turn to Gary Peart in a few, but before we get to him, I thought I'd mention that for those of you who are not on YouTube yet, you can go and check out our YouTube channel. It is the Jamaica Olympic Association. We're also on social media, whichever social media site platform you're on, we're there. So on Instagram, we are the Jamaica Olympic, and that's the same thing for TikTok. We're there also. Facebook, it is the Jamaica Olympic Association. And on Twitter, it's JA Olympic. Ensure that you like anything that is there or share whatever we have. We have some interns also who are doing a fantastic job there, so you can reach out to them. All right, enough from me. I have Gary Peart, who is the CEO for Mayberry Investment with us. He has been the CEO since May 2005. He has over 20 years of corporate experience and has been doing a fantastic job there in Mayberry Investment and has been giving advice to athletes and to many other persons. And we thought we'd get his perspective on this webinar on money-making moves. Just some advice for athletes in terms of investment, in terms of saving also, and some of the do's and don'ts. Anyway, he knows what to say and what to do, and I won't take up any more of his time. Over to you, Gary Peart.
Thank you, Dalton. Good afternoon, everybody. Afternoon, Secretary General, President. Always good to hear you. Dalton, I think you have a presentation there for me, but I would probably just cycle through as we go along.
Yeah, the technical team should be putting that up soon. As Rashika, Tethleroy, they're hearing me, so here we go.
There you go. Yeah, so, I mean, the first slide is going to get into what's really important. So I want to go pretty quickly because I think the questions are going to, question and answer is the best way of doing this. So one of the most important things a human can do in their life after being born, of course, is to retire. And a lot of us, especially when we're younger, don't think about retirement, but retirement is very, very important. And one of the things people need to recognize is you should plan for retirement as early as you can. In the same way, you should start to invest as early as possible. The two go hand in hand. One of the worst things is to see somebody come to the end of their working career, been working on contracts, 60 to 70 years old, and they have no savings. And it's difficult to see somebody like that trying to get back into the working world, competing with 20 and 30-year-olds and stuff. So, but what makes it more interesting is that, again, when you look at the Jamaican scenario, most of the people who have a pension or a pension fund, which are used towards retirement, tend to be what we call 9-to-5 workers or workers which are on PAYE. And in a lot of instances, it's because their companies insist that they invest in a pension fund. Why they invest in the pension fund? Because the statistics shows that the majority of people in the labor force don't actually have a pension. that they're saving towards, which isn't good. We need to increase that. But again, why am I speaking about this? It's even more acute with athletes and sporting professionals. And again, what happens to them is, especially when they're successful, they get a lot of funds upfront and they get paid above ordinary because of how the sporting discipline is indeed structured. And that we have seen situations where athletes feel that this will be the case for an infinite period of time, when the fact is that your career is very finite. The other main challenge that I've seen, especially with athletes and sporting professionals, is that the time they spent being on top of their field, a lot of basic things which would help them with investing, etc., they didn't have time for. So some people don't finish high school, university, they don't do a master's, and they might not necessarily have the proper professional team around them. And that creates a recipe for disaster, because what happens is that when you look at a different type of person that is thinking about retirement, that sporting professional or athlete is probably the number one in trying to determine how am I going to invest my money on the back end, because your career is going to finish. I don't know who is moving the slide, but I haven't moved it from the first page. So I've been speaking on that. And one of the things I will move into is, how do you save and invest for this type of retirement? And I always say, you invest, you don't save. So if you're not, okay. So therefore, once, especially as an athlete or a sporting professional, the point at which you are having significant cash flows, yes, it's always good to, buy a house, buy a car, etc. But you have to sit and think about, okay, how many years am I going to be earning at this level? Then after my career is finished, what is my cash flow going to fall to? And then how am I going to survive after my sporting career? And that sets the stage about how much of the money now you should start to put away. And the more money you put away now is the larger it's going to be when you get to the end of when you get to your retirement age. So I will segue into, investments and the different types of investment. Obviously, you make your money. Most people spend a lot of time making money, but then don't spend a lot of time thinking about how to invest that money. And there are a variety of different investments. You have cash, leave in a savings account. You have money market instruments. You have fixed income instruments. You have equities. You have real estate, etc. And the key word I would put here now is diversification. You do not know what tomorrow holds. And, you have people who have just bought as much real estate as they can find. They get into a health problem. They can't liquidate fast enough, and it creates an issue. And then if you're trying to force sale the property, you get significantly less than the value of the property. So there's diversification and planning. It doesn't matter how great the return is on a real estate, fixed income, or stock. You need to have some short-term cash in the event of an emergency or other opportunities. So, one of the areas that we've seen significant returns, especially at Mayberry, is in the Jamaican stock market and equities and stocks in general. And again, what we find is that the earlier you invest is the better your likely return is going to be. So when we look on a chart of real estate returns versus equity returns, the equity market outperforms the real estate over the long term. And that's where a lot of our customers invest, and that's where they've made some very, very good returns. So equity gives you capital gain, which is if you buy it, say, at $5 and it moves to $8, the differential of $3 is what we refer to as a capital gain. And how do you determine that? You invest in a company that you think is a growing company, growing in the sense that they'll grow their revenues. So if they have one location and you think they can, over 5-7 years, they'll move to 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 locations, which, as a simple example, but it grows their profits, and in growing their profits, the value of the company increases, and most importantly, it allows them to pay dividends. And that dividends is a stream of cash which you can use to spend, or you can use to reinvest in different ways. So For that professional athlete, we at Mayberry, we allow you to do one of three things. Number one is that you can go and buy pick your own shares, etc. It's always good. We have advisors that will teach you what you need to look at. But for that professional, you also have a second opportunity in that we have portfolios that we manage for you. So we being the expert that start looking on these things every day of the hour, sorry, every minute in the hour, each day of the week, we understand it a lot better. We charge you a fee. Over time, we realize that the return to you actually supersedes the cost of that fee. And because it's expertly managed, you end up being in a better place. And the third is a hybrid, in that you can have a small portfolio, but also have a portfolio that's managed by the professional. Later on, I'll show you some equities that we think you should probably take a look at. But what you're trying to achieve is a return that beats inflation. And once you're investing and getting more than inflation, it means that your wealth is growing at a very good pace. And that's all you're trying to do each year. Beat inflation, get a real return. And that will ensure when you get to retirement, you will have funds to do, not just to do as you please, but in the event you get sick, in the event you want to have trips, etc., you can indeed pay for them. The market fluctuates, and that's why we tend to tell people you should have a longer term view, because companies make money today, they lose money tomorrow, but they make it again the following day. You don't want to be in a situation where you're trying to buy and sell. And what we found is that individual investors have tried that. Over the long term, they lose more than they gain because it's very difficult to time the market. But a well-run company over time will give you very, very good returns. Next slide. So again, I've touched on a couple of these things. You want to be flexible, have liquidity. Again, instruments like like equities or fixed income that have periodic cash flows. And I think the best of the bunch is a dividend paying stock that has, capital, that has very good capital gains. Let me just cycle down to the picks, because that's what I think generates most of the questions. You have here the performance of the market. What you'd have seen is that if you entered the market in 2015, you'd have benefited significantly. So for the couple of years before, if you had held your position, which is one of the reasons I say you have to have a long-term outlook. If you sold, unfortunately, in 2015, you'd have missed that bull run. And what you see is that the market trended up. And even though it has come off a bit this year, it is still more than 100% above where it was in 2015. So that's the kind of graph you're looking at, and that's the type of market you want to get into before you see takes that huge upturn. Next slide. Next slide. And that was the main market, it's the junior market. It's basically the same thing. It's jumping. Can switch again for me, please? So I just summarize the performance with that graph. And as I said, if you came into the market in 2015, you'd have made some really ridiculous returns, and we've created a lot of millionaires during that period of time. Can you move on, please? Continue. Yeah, so this is an example of the performance for 2020. And if you think about 2020, you had COVID at around the second week of March. And, the market took a big dip. But notwithstanding that, you had companies like Epley that gave you a return of 100%. You're not going to invest in any bank or fixed income that's going to give you that type of return in a year. Key Insurance, which was taken over by Grace Kennedy, that has given a return of 86%. You've seen Mailpac. And again, Mailpac is one of those companies that has benefited significantly from COVID because a lot of people are moving online, placing their orders, etc. So, so that was a company where a lot of investors are like, this is a no-brainer. Going into COVID, there's no way this business should not do well. And for those that went in, they got a return of over 30% in a very difficult market. Notwithstanding that, just flipping over to the other side, which is dividend yield, you have a stock like Carreras. Carreras obviously manufactures the cigarettes. And you'll see where the dividend yield, which is similar to the interest rate. Can you just go back? Let me just finish that, please. The dividend yield, which is similar to the interest rate on a fixed income instrument for Carreras, was 8.86%. Most money market funds that are in the country right now will probably give you a return under 5%. Most of them in Jamaican dollars is probably closer to an average of 2 or 3%. So can you imagine buying a stock for capital gains, but getting dividend flows that at 9%, that's almost 3 times better than what you get from buying a treasury bill or government of Jamaica CD. Trans Jamaica, that's a highway company. That was a company that threw off a nice dividend of 5.62%. SVL, which I also chair, consistently that company pays very good dividends. Just a disclaimer, I chair that company, but I also own stock in that company. And so these are the type of investments you want to be making. And why is this important, especially for a lot of you athletes out there? This year was a very, very tough year because of COVID. This year, when you're able to train at your optimum best and go out and perform and earn in the way you would normally earn, you'd have been able to use your money to make these kind of returns. So you wouldn't have to be worried about your future because you didn't run and win a race this year. If you manage your money properly, you could have been investing in these companies and making these kind of returns. Year to date for 2021, we've actually seen where Lumber Depot, and again, I have to do another disclaimer. My company owns 20%, I think 20-something% of this business, their largest shareholder. It's a hardware store up in Pepin. Year to date, that's up 64%. Caribbean Flavors, Blue Power, again, we have something in that, that's up 47%. Grace Kennedy, a brand that you all know, has been up 41%. And these are companies and these are securities that you can buy just by going to your broker. I mean, obviously, Mayberry is one of the better ones, if not the best, in my opinion. So you can come, we have advisors that will advise you in how to deal and select and invest in some of these shares. So I'll pause here. Dalton, I don't know if you do the question and answers. Oh, the last slide. Let me just go through the last slide very quickly in terms of our suggestions. So coming out of Mayberry, as at March 15th, we believe the following are our top buys. Wigton Wind Farm, again, I think at this point we're the largest shareholder in that. Supreme Ventures, I chair it, and we're holding in that. Grace Kennedy, they're doing well, with exposure in that. JMB Group actually is trading at one of the lowest points of financial services companies. Carreras, I touched on. Lasco Manufacturing, they have been doing pretty well coming out of COVID because of food distribution company, they've all been doing well. Lasco Distributors, their sister companies. Mailpack I spoke to before, and obviously Lumber Depot has been doing very well. So, if you don't come to Mayberry, but you want to go somewhere else, here is a list that you can look at investing in. Should help you towards your retirement. Thank you. Dalton.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gary Peart and Christopher Samuda. Now, we are going to be having 2 other panelists, but I'm going to pause just a bit to take some questions. There's a plethora of questions, so many questions for both Samuda and Peart. Peart, I'll throw this one quickly at you because an athlete just WhatsApped it to me. They wanted to know, Siboney Investment seem to be doing well, fakely or otherwise, while other companies like NCB are probably struggling a bit over the past few months. What advice would you have for athletes in terms of that investment without giving out any top secret if needs be?
I'm actually very, very happy for that question. Because one of the things I indicated is that you try to select companies that's going to be here for the long term. And I answer that question by saying this to you. Siboney put out a release recently saying that they only have one more year of cash. So if that don't tell you what you must do, I don't know what else. Unfortunately, you have people who are not professionals and don't spend a lot of time understanding the market to realize that at this point, Siboney is just a shell. They have sold off all their major assets. They just have some cash, and that cash is burning because they're not earning any revenue if at all. You know, but some people are attracted to the fact that the price is very cheap. 10 cents, 9 cents, I don't know where it is, doesn't matter. It really don't have much future. And so my position is that if you ever had a choice between Siboney and NCB, it's NCB every day of the week. It might fluctuate now, but NCB is going to be around much, much longer than Siboney.
Yeah, I mean, that has been one of the interesting one. Mr. Samuda, I thought I'd bring you in here. Well, not about Siboney, definitely. I know you know about that. But in terms of leadership, one of the interesting questions is how has the pandemic adjusted your leadership of the largest NOC, certainly in the English-speaking Caribbean, and how are you managing those dynamics with this pandemic on us?
Well, certainly it has reinforced in me the need to be very corporate, very ecumenical in terms of my leadership style. It has also reinforced in me from an organizational point of view that we have to pay sufficient attention, not only to the business model of the organization, but also in terms of the corporate structure of the organization. Happily, as you perhaps know, Dalton, we have a business model that is really resistant to events, I would put it events, pandemic events. But certainly from a Caribbean point of view, we have had discussions at this level in terms of the effect of the pandemics. And what has been reinforced in conversations all the time is that the importance of certain professionals, the sports psychologists, in the context of the athletes' well-being and welfare. Often we do not pay sufficient attention to the value of the sports psychologists. And the pandemic, of course, has created in the governors as well as the governed the value of sports psychologists. We also have to pay attention and have emotional intelligence as leaders to understand the context in which athletes are operating, the adverse context in which they are operating, and understand the instruments of leadership that we have to apply in order to ensure that, as I've said repeatedly, they do not negotiate with defeat, but that they are inspired to surmount the barriers and hurdles caused by this pandemic. So it has created in me, certainly, more greater appreciation of the various types of leadership and how we must apply those types of leadership with positive results in crises.
I couldn't help but stay with you, Mr. Samuda. Gary, just bear with me. I have a lot of questions for you, but someone just asked me, can the GOA, will the GOA be sustainable with the challenges that are there from IOC, etc.? Are we in a good position? I say we, obviously, because I'm part of the organization. Are we in a good position, and should there be any concerns for stakeholders?
Absolutely no concerns at all. As I've said previously, we have a business model that really is not perforated by the crises. What we have done, however, to the GOA is to ensure that we diversify our revenue streams. That is good governance, that is good financial governance. And therefore we have gone into the corporate world and sealed partnerships because we understand that certainly in the midst of a crisis, you have to rely on diverse income streams and not necessarily just one. Happily, IOC as an organization, which is one of our funders, has not really been shaken by the pandemic at all. And in fact, they have assisted NOCs globally in terms of injection of cash in relation to certain of their operations. But it hasn't affected the Jamaica Olympic Association. What we have to ensure though, as corporate leaders, as ecumenical leaders, and as intuitive leaders, that we build capacity in our federations who may not have the revenue model that we have to withstand the pandemic. And therefore, that is, of course, a responsibility of our governing organization. And we have started already by indicating to our federations the management structure, the business model that they must adopt to ensure that they insulate themselves as best as they can in crises.
Really appreciate it. And for those of you just joining us, welcome. We've been having some good presentations so far. Two more to come, Danusha Francis and Juliet Campbell. Incidentally, to our two presenters so far, I'm not too sure if you know, but today is Juliet Campbell's birthday. She's our next presenter soon. So at some point, we'll get to wish her a very happy 20th
birthday.
Since you're there, Gary, I thought I'd get your position on this. Someone asked, most athletes earn US dollars. That's most athletes. Could you speak to depreciation risk and taxes?
Sure. Dalton, I know we started late, but remember I have to jump off at 6.
Yeah, man, which is why I'm shooting at you.
Right. So again, one of the certainties that until the government changes the structure of the country's finances, one certainty is going to be the valuation. The only issue is the rate of that devaluation. So if an athlete is earning US dollars, one of the first things they should do is they should limit the amount of US dollars they convert to pay Jamaican dollar bills. I saw one of the other questions and I wanted to answer it pretty quickly whilst I answered this.
Yeah, go right ahead.
One of the best things you could do as an athlete is to hire a financial advisor. There are too many people who think that understanding investments, understanding finance is not rocket science. And more people lose money thinking they know how to make it than the professionals that are out there. So that answer is yes. With the divide, you don't have a depreciation risk if you're earning US. You actually have a positive scenario because the US dollar over time actually appreciates against the Jamaican dollar.
Yeah, really appreciate that. And just before you go, another question for you is that I think that's what, given the dwindling sponsorship dollar from corporate for sporting association, what advice would you give the GOA and its members on how best to monetize its assets to not only sustain but also grow during and after a pandemic?
The first question is obviously as much of your funds that you can maintain in US dollars at this point, you should. Because again, you're going to take advantage of the devaluation, so that gives you more Jamaican dollars. I think also, again, having a financial advisor, not only for the GOA, but to help its member associations, because the member associations also have some amount of cash that they need to understand if they invest it responsibly, they can get more bang for the buck. Fundamentally, corporate entities want to align themselves with a brand that represents their brand. So winning, once you're winning, you can't guarantee being able to win, but once you're winning, you will always have more corporate dollars willing to be invested. Once you're professional, and it's something to be fair to President Samuda, it's something he stresses. Once you're a professional, even if you're not winning, a corporate entity will be more likely to align with you because they don't expect that you will behave in an unprofessional manner, which might damage their brand. And I think that's the biggest takeaway I'd leave with you guys. Being professional, understanding your business, you exude a certain amount of confidence that makes that corporate sponsor want to align themselves with you. A lot of people don't realize sometimes what causes a corporate entity to make a decision to invest a lot of times has less to do with dollars as opposed to simple soft issues like your confidence, your poise, how you bring yourself, how the team is done. And that's one of the reasons I support President Samuda and the Secretary General in their thrust to not just to modernize, but to improve the professionalism of the GOA and by extension, its member associations.
Great. That first question coming in from Nelson Christian Stokes and the second one from
Hey, Christian.
I know you have to leave, Gary, and I have so many questions, but I'll try to get some responses and put them on our website.
Sure.
But I really
I can take one before I go. My next show is slightly delayed.
Oh no, amazing. That's great. Let me just shoot one before you, Mr. Samud. I hope you don't mind. I'll just shoot one more to
No,
Gary,
not at
and
all.
then I have a few for you. Gary, what are some of the pitfalls you see, you have seen sitting where you are, that athletes make on a daily basis or yearly basis, whichever one, that you think they need to stop or they need to be more aware of in making these investments and managing their monies?
Their best friend is not the greatest financial advisor. That's the first one I would say. Um, there are some who have been able to go away and learn part of the business, but over time you find that somebody who is inexperienced, they will earn their reputation. They're inexperienced, they're going to make mistakes. I think that's the first thing an athlete needs to do. The second thing, they need to realize that when they're making that kind of money, you need professionals around you to handle that kind of money. The third and final thing I would say is that, again, because the whole cash flow profile of an athlete's life is, you need to recognize that this bundle of cash that you're seeing today, you're not going to be making that kind of money in 5 years, 10 years time. So you can't be spending all of it thinking that you're going to get another big check tomorrow, because again, you can get an injury and there ended that story. So those are the key things that I think once an athlete starts that way, as I said, it might be a little more expensive to carry a professional, but it gives you two positives. Number one is that they know how to invest your money. So you can take away, you can focus on what you do best, which is to run. And if you can do that, that's your best case scenario that you want to be as an athlete. You don't have to worry that you're being somebody teething you or whatever it is. You know that is being taken care of. Finally, it's not that you're going to give them carte blanche. You need to be able, it's your money, it's your thing. You need to check up on it using independent sources, that all is well. And I think once you do that, and everybody understand that this is your structure, any athlete and every athlete that I've seen that has done that have come out very well on the other side.
Great. Thanks for that. President, what
Thanks,
single...
guys.
Yeah, man, appreciate it. Cheers. That's Gary Peart, CEO for Mayberry Investment. President, what single and most important advice would you give to leaders of member associations of the GOA?
First, I would give my first advice is that you have to listen to your constituent members. Leaders are only leaders because they lead a constituency. If there's no constituency, you're not a leader. So you have to be sensitive to the demands, the needs, the likes, the dislikes, the vision, the mission, the aspirations, ambitions of your constituent members. And you not only have to know and listen, but you have to understand them. And having understood them, you now have to apply the various instruments of leadership in order to ensure that you inspire confidence in your own methodology of leadership, but that you also ensure that there is a positive result from your constituency. So knowing your constituency, understanding their needs and demands, and be in a position to apply the various instruments of leadership for a positive result. Second thing that I would commend to leaders is that you have to understand that every day you're a student. You are a leader by designation, but by experience, you're a student. And a student never stops learning. If you feel that you are the be all and the end all, it therefore means that you are becoming a substitute for the organization. But if you're a student learning intelligently, and at the same time imparting leadership qualities, then you are the face of the institution and you're not the substitute. So that is another lesson I would commend to myself and others as leaders. And then finally, I would say you have to understand the technology of your constituents members. And when I say technology, I don't necessarily mean technology in the modern sense as we know. What I mean is that you have to understand the science of the mind of your constituency. In other words, a coach, what is his aspiration as a coach? What is his mental aptitude? What is his mental horizon? The administrator, what is his or her mental horizon? The athlete, what is his or her mental horizon? And you not only have to know the textbook knowledge in order to determine the result, but you have to be an intuitive leader. You have to be a corporate leader in understanding that profile. So those are the three critical things, Dalton, that I would commend to myself as well as other leaders.
Great. An athlete just posed a question, and I'll read it here, that says several athletes are now a bit worried about support leading up to the games because there are challenges. Help us to understand some of the support given to athletes and association for Tokyo 2021. I'm assuming in terms of from the Jamaica Olympic Association, what are some of the support that is being given to help athletes in these tough times?
Well, without discounting the validity and value of that question, let me say the JOE has been given support long before the pandemic. We give support through Olympic Solidarity Scholarships to individual athletes. We fund individual athletes in terms of their aspirations, not only in terms of Olympics, but other championships. We fund the educational imperatives and aspirations of athletes. So we have been funding long before the pandemic. So the pandemic has not changed our culture. What it has done is to accentuate it. And therefore the commitments that we have made in 2019 in relation to supporting the aspiration, Olympic aspiration bids of our athletes remain unchanged. And in fact, we have redoubled our effort where that is concerned. My apologies. In terms of our member associations, we have always helped our member associations in terms of their athlete performance, qualifying for games, their corporate structure. And we continue to do so, both in terms of cash and kind as well, because we have, facilitated many of our members in terms of retreats, their corporate governance planning methods. So we continue to not only hand the check, which in and of itself, you should do very guardedly. Because what we at the Jamaica Olympic Association want is to ensure that our member associations organically grow. And you don't make them organically grow by handouts in relation to events. You microscope their organization and you give them qualitative leadership and qualitative help to ensure that within the organization, they can respond positively to external crises, internal crises, and grow almost automatically. And that is now when you will be able to support your athlete as a member association. But we continue to assist, and that is our duty and obligation, and we take it very seriously, Dalton, as you know.
Very well. I do know that, President Christopher Samuda. I know at some point you'll have to leave us, but I hope you can still...
I have about 10 more minutes to spare, or 15.
Fair enough. I'll get into some of the other presenters. I have with me Juliet Campbell. I know Juliet is a manager for sport marketing, and wherever you are, you can put it in the chat. You can go over on YouTube and put it there just to wish her a happy birthday. Today is her 20th. And so, I'm really happy that she could take the time out to be with us. She's a manager of sports marketing at Puma and a former national representative. Of course, she's an Olympian and has worked with several athletes in various capacity. Juliet will now make her presentation. Juliet, welcome.
Sir President, thank you guys for having me here. Hi. So today I'll be talking about sports development, specifically in Jamaica. Puma has been a part of this initiative, this collaboration with Jamaica for quite some time, actually 20 plus years now. And we've done a lot in Jamaica. We have invested a lot, continue to invest a lot, and will continue to invest a lot in the future. We have a very good mutually benefiting relationship with the JOA, the J3, and the sporting bodies in Jamaica, coaches, athletes, and so forth. In terms of sporting development in Jamaica, our main purpose is to help to further develop sports in Jamaica and the community. Jamaica is, and this is for track and field specifically in this sentence, is our flagship country that we use, anything that we have new, branding that we literally use, initiate in Jamaica first to spread out to the other countries that we sponsor, other delegations that we sponsor. We invest a lot in Jamaica in our high schools, which is the grassroots level, which is under my portfolio. And we are very happy with the work that we have done and continue to do. We at Puma were aware of a lot of the issues in Jamaica. Many athletes comes from varying backgrounds, which is mostly of very bad socioeconomic, poverty. And there's a lot going in getting an athlete to a level where they can perform optimally. And so being aware of that, us at Puma, we have invested a lot to make sure that a lot of these athletes are able to come to school, to train after school, and to be able to perform well. We are aware of many of the issues even after they're done with high school and even college. And we are most often here to support that transition between high school and professional, college and professional. As you guys may know, many of our athletes are not able to leave to go to college or even able to get into college in Jamaica, but they do exude talents to do well sports-wise. And that's where we come in, is either I identify these athletes or the coaches or the federations may identify these athletes, and we will step in and assist, sometimes through the federations themselves and sometimes on our own. So we do a lot there. We do anything from financial sponsorship, education-wise. We take care of several different levels that needs to be achieved in order for this athlete to be able to perform optimally. We are proud sponsors of both our federations, where we work concurrently to help these athletes. And so it has shown over the years, the relationship between Puma and our federations, JOA, J3, and the level of performance that has come out of Jamaica since. We are to be reckoned with in sports, and it just shows that a lot of work has been done on all leadership levels and support levels, and we continue to do a lot more. And COVID-19 last year has put a big damper on a lot of athletes. We sponsor quite a large number of Jamaican athletes all over the world, but a large number of Jamaican athletes, female athletes, and it has come to our attention about some of the issues that a lot of these athletes have had. A lot of these athletes' contract ended in 2019 with the intention of renewing those contracts in 2020. Some of these athletes' contracts ended in 2020, and because of lack of competition, there lie the issues of getting a contract for 2021. We have stepped in on to assist a lot of these athletes. Obviously, COVID is not the fault of any organization or any athlete. And so we have stepped in and continue to support most of these athletes to make sure that they're on track to prepare for the Olympic Games. And those who are still going through a hard time, we're hoping to come back on board with them to make sure that they're doing well. But we will continue our support through all organizations, like I said, JOA, J3A, the ISA Foundation, the several high schools that we sponsor in Jamaica, not only the traditional high schools, but those who are not so traditional and at the top level. We do a lot of work with those schools also on varying levels. So, us at Puma, we're on board 100% with sports development, planning development, social development, logistics, in sports, exterior all around. We are on board and we will continue to do so. We enjoy what we do there, and yeah, we're here to continue and help.
Thank you very much, Juliet, and really appreciate it. We're moving right along. We have questions for you already, by the way. The
Yes.
questions are coming in. But before I get to you, I have Danusha Francis with us. Nusha, as she's affectionately called, has already qualified for Tokyo 2021. She's been doing a great job in gymnastics and also using the time during the pandemic to do other stuff in terms of coaching and workshops, etc. I don't know much about her work as she does, so I'm going to ask Danusha Francis to make her presentation just about how it has been training and, well, not competing, but training during this time leading up to Tokyo 2021.
Thank you very much, Dalton, and thanks so much for having me on this panel. It is an honour to be here, and happy birthday, Juliet, before I carry on. As Dalton mentioned,
Thank you.
You're welcome. I have qualified for the Olympics, which I know a lot of athletes still have their qualifications still to come, so I definitely think this is a huge blessing, and it obviously is a huge motivator for me. So seeing that my topic was pivot and training in the new normal, I thought I'd just try to paint a picture of how it's been since last year and since the pandemic took over everybody's lives. I also thought the topic of the webinar being keeping the dream alive was very fitting to sort of where I am now and where my headspace is when I am in training. So I'll get to that. But obviously it was a year ago now, sort of March, when most countries in the world, it really was the forefront of the news and everybody's lives. And that was when I'm in the UK and I train here. And that was when we went into a full lockdown. So immediately training was at home. And luckily for me, my partner, he has a health and fitness gym. So I was able to use that. But obviously being a gymnast, I need the equipment. So it was helpful, but not quite the same as training in a gymnastics gym. As I can imagine for lots of athletes, they were able to do a little bit, but just not quite where you wanted to be. But the initial hurdle, I would say, was the psychological part of not knowing whether the Olympics was going to be cancelled. And this was obviously a thought that kind of was in the back of my mind. And we definitely didn't find out for a good few weeks that it was only going to be postponed. And this was a huge relief. As you can imagine, this is going to be my first Olympics and I'm going to be Jamaica's second ever gymnast at the Olympics. So I'm so proud, and it's just a huge dream of mine. And so the thought of doing all this hard work and qualifying and all this hard work for me starting from the age of 5 years old is when I started gymnastics. So it's 20 years in the making. And yeah, for this dream to then be cancelled, that was just such a horrible thought to have. So postpone was a huge relief, and I was able to give me a spark of motivation for this home training. So all my training then, and I'm sure again the same for a lot of athletes around the world, was on Zoom. So I must commend my coaches. They did a brilliant job. They kept us all in pretty good shape and really motivated. And some of these sessions were really quite hard, and they were really creative. And this also then motivated me to do some of my own Zoom sessions. I was getting approached through social media and emails from different parents and asked to put on some sessions. So I kind of got into a groove, and it became just part of my weekly routine, and it still is now. So it's been kind of a year now of being coaching on Zoom. And one silver lining, there has been a few, so I'll touch on those, but one silver lining of the whole pandemic was it kind of gave everybody that online connection. So all of us that compete in gymnastics are based in different countries. So to then have to find this connection online, not only between us that are competing internationally for Jamaica, but also with the grassroots levels and the younger gymnasts. And Nicole, the president of Jamaican Gymnastics, she reached out to us and asked us for some at-home training programs, and then also when they were able to go back into the gym for some training programs for them. And I think things like that wouldn't have come about without everyone having to take that step back and be at home. So in doing that, it was really cool to then see these videos of these young athletes, young gymnasts in Jamaica in their gardens and doing some of the workouts that I'd sent through. And also we commented on their videos, giving them training tips and stuff like that. So to really feel that team, that sense of helping the next level. And we're trying to trailblaze for the sport of gymnastics. So to then actually be able to coach a bit via social media, via Zoom and stuff like that is kind of that next level of just being an example. You're actually being able to give some input and some coaching, some advice to the next generation. So that was definitely a silver line for me, and I'm happy to be continuing my Zoom coaching. And as mentioned, I am the other gymnast. We do live in different countries, and so I know this is quite common now, and there's a lot of different international athletes living in different countries. So this also posed another hurdle in my return to training. So elite athletes in the UK were allowed to return to training in June, and obviously I've qualified for the Olympics. I consider myself an elite athlete, but unfortunately British Gymnastics decided to not allow me back to training. So then I had to get in touch with local MPs, also the High Commission here, the Jamaican High Commission, and luckily all of those people were very supportive, and it did take a few weeks, but eventually I was allowed back to training in July and have been allowed in all the following lockdowns. So that was just kind of like, not only did it delay me getting back into training, but also just on my morale. Like, I've worked so hard to qualify and be at the Olympics, and for then people or whoever it was that made that decision to then say, no, you're not allowed back to training, you're not an elite athlete. So it was okay, I just carried on at home, and eventually I was allowed back in, and it was great to have the support of my local MP, the sports minister, and the Jamaican High Commission here. So two sides to look at it there. Obviously it was that one side where some people are not calling me an elite athlete, and then the other side where I had this great support from these people that were able to help me get back into training. But I'm sure, like I said, a lot of athletes are going to have different issues like that along the way with this pandemic. So back into training in July. So it had been a long time by that point, about 8 months out of the gym. So in gymnastics, I'm sure a lot of you have seen a bit of gymnastics, so you can appreciate how physically demanding it is, but it is also very psychologically demanding. So that's definitely something that I've had to make sure I can build my psychological and my confidence up alongside the physical side. So just really making sure my mind was in the right place when I'm getting my skills back, and just taking the time to really prepare myself physically and psychologically. And again, I'm sure a lot of athletes can relate to that as well. And then talking on that psychological side, now it's been a long time since I have competed. So the qualifying event was October 2019, and that was my last big event. I did some smaller events at the start of 2020, but not with my full routines and not all the events. So there's 4 and I just did 2. And so yeah, it's been a long time out of competition. So this is something that is on my mind at the moment, because I obviously want to get in a lot of competition practice before the Olympics. But at the same time, I'm just trying to focus on the things I can control. So just hopefully the pandemic continues to get better, and then I can do some international competitions. But if not, hopefully internal competitions. And obviously safety is still the #1 priority. But again, a lot of athletes, we won't be able to do the competition preparation that we would have hoped to, building up to the biggest competition there is, the Olympic Games. So I think that's definitely a challenge that people are going to have to face that are in the same position as me. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that hopefully everything keeps progressing with the pandemic, and we are able to get some competition experience in before we are on that world stage. Some of the other challenges right now is definitely motivation. So I mentioned I'm allowed back into training, but still my teammates that I usually train with, there's only one other girl who is allowed to train. So in the gym, it's either just me and my coach or 2 of us and our coach. So obviously you're used to having that atmosphere, you're used to having lots of different people in the gym, cheering each other on, and say one person has a really great turn and you want to then have a great turn yourself. So just that atmosphere of having lots of teammates around you, people chasing their goals, is obviously missing at the moment. It's quite hard to recreate that with just 2 or 3 people in a huge gymnastics gym. So that's just something that you just really got to look inside yourself and just keep reminding myself of what my goal is. And again, I do feel very grateful that I have qualified at this point. So it's not that I'm just looking to do trials. I am really fully focused on the Olympics. So that's definitely driving my motivation. But just that lack of atmosphere, again, I'm sure there's people out there that can relate. It's quite difficult at this time. Another thing that I feel I haven't really had to deal with before this year was kind of all the speculation around the Olympics. As soon as you go onto social media, there's an article about the Olympics, and obviously before it was whether it was going to go ahead at all, and then now you still see some articles doubting whether it will go ahead, and then also doubting whether there will be spectators. And so just obviously knowing this does affect me, it's hard to not read them. So yeah, it's hard to not log on to social media and not check these news sources. And just even without the news sources, you've got friends and you've got acquaintances that want to know. They want to know everything, and they think you have all these answers, but you don't. So that's definitely another challenge that's kind of on our plates at the moment as athletes. Again, kind of relating back to what Mr. Pat was saying, with the financial side, obviously going into the Olympics, especially having already been qualified, I do get different propositions and asked to do different videos or work with different brands, and not on a massive scale, but just knowing which brands are right to work with, and just small things that haven't had to arise, but Olympic year, and I think all eyes are on this Olympics. So just making those decisions and knowing what's the right thing to do. And it's a lot of added pressure and stresses that you wouldn't normally have in a normal training year. So exciting on one side, but also just you want to make sure you're doing the right things, and you also want to make sure you're still prioritizing your training. Obviously with coronavirus, we've had to get used to different protocols in place. So hand washing, masks, social distancing. I'm sure you all know, I don't need to list them. And again, this is one thing that I don't know if this is a personal thing, but I would love to compete under the COVID restrictions. So just having that practice of warming up with my mask on and only taking it off right before I salute the judges. I just think that's something you definitely want to practice, because I've never had to compete like that in my life. Obviously in training it's different, but in competition you've already got so many different things to think about, and you've got that pressure, you've got the nerves, so that's an added stress. And obviously at the Olympic Games, I'm sure we're going to have to follow these protocols. So wanting to practice those, especially in a competition setting, is something that I'm going to hopefully get to do, but at the moment it's not planned. So that's something that's on my mind also. Yeah, but like I said, there has been some silver linings. An extra year has also been an extra year to get stronger. I've got a new floor routine, so that's with the choreography and the dance. So I love performing, so that's been really fun to do. I've also tried a new skill that I never in my wildest dreams would have thought I would try. So that's been a really cool goal that I've set myself, and really keeps me motivated during training. So there has been a few silver linings. I think also I mentioned about social media and everyone being online. I think it's brought different communities together. I mean, right now, I don't know if I'd be on this panel. And as I mentioned before, with the Jamaica Gymnastics Association, that's brought us as a whole community closer. And I would say as well, the gymnastics community. So I think that's been a great thing, and just there's nothing better than people being brought together. Obviously, we wish it was under different circumstances, but definitely a silver lining. And I think the main silver lining, as I touched on at the beginning, is that it wasn't cancelled. Mr. Samuda touched on destiny, and I truly believe that it's in my destiny to represent Jamaica at the Olympic Games, and not for my own personal gain. Obviously, this is a personal dream, but also just to continue trailblazing for Jamaica gymnastics. I feel like my passion for gymnastics in Jamaica is just built and built, and to see now we've got our facility, and just to see all the videos since the lockdown has eased over there, and just to see the kids all progressing. So I think for me to be able to compete at this Olympics and just to show that we are still up there and the second ever Olympian, and hopefully from now on we have an Olympian and then a team every single year. So I truly do believe it's my destiny. So just keeping that in mind. And a couple of other things that have helped me during this time is visualization. So some of those days where it has been a struggle in training, just visualizing sometimes the night before, if I feel like I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be tired or sore. So just really trying to prepare. Like I said, you don't have the atmosphere to get you going. So just mentally and physically preparing as best as I can for not the end goal, but every single day, because leading up to the Olympics, it's every single day that's going to count now. So I can't feel sorry for myself that I'm all alone in the gym. I have to get through it somehow. And also just writing down my goals too. So if I just need that reminder, just writing it down, the Olympic Games, that's enough for me. Just write that down. And sometimes watching old videos back, just believing that if I don't get to compete, I've done it so many times before, and I can do it. As in, if I don't get to compete before the Olympics, because the Olympics is going to happen. And on that note, positive self-talk, and just also not being afraid to ask for help. You're not in this alone, whether that's family members, whether that's my coach, whether that is the Jamaican Gymnastics Association. Just don't be afraid to ask for help. We are all in this together. It's not easy for anybody, whether you're whatever you are. This has not been easy, and just dealing with the emotional side of things. Just one point I forgot to touch on was there still are people dying. This is still a pandemic, so for every single person, it's an emotional roller coaster. I had a family member pass away, so a couple of days in training after that, it was very easy for me to feel down and to feel sorry for myself. So channeling your energy in the right way and knowing how much she supported me and trying to channel it in, she wouldn't want me to waste these training sessions. So I kind of leave it on that note, and hopefully that's painted a picture of the struggles, but also of some of the silver linings that I've had to face and my fellow athletes this past year.
Thank you very much, Danusha. And let me just say, on behalf of the team here, and certainly I think I can speak on behalf of Mr. Foster, who is also watching, and Mr. Samuda, condolences to you and the rest of the family. But we're really happy that you're able to get in some training now, etc. Let me just put some questions quickly. Juliet, this one is for you. Understanding that athletics being the top sport for Jamaica, does Puma look at sport like swimming, which has standout athlete like Alia Atkinson and rising star in terms of that kind of a support? Juliet, that one is for you.
Yeah. In honesty, we don't. We work not on the level that we do with athletics. We do through the Jamaica Olympic Association at the relevant points where it is needed, i.e. Championship, Commonwealth Games, the Olympic Games, etc. And the reason being, we literally do not produce swim gear. The sports we are sports lifestyle, athletics, soccer. In Australia, we have netball. By regions, we literally at Puma International in Germany, we don't do sporting gear. So, no, we don't.
All right, interesting. And
so what we do though, in saying that, for the Olympic Games, yes, we must. So we have to specifically produce these gears for persons such as Aliyah and the other athletes have the appropriate gear to compete in. But outside of the games, we don't, as specific as we would sponsor track and field athletes, we don't have allocations where we can sponsor a swimmer. We don't.
Okay. All right, great. Another question here for Juliet. Puma has been a strong supporter of Jamaica and our athletes. What is the single reason why Puma still continues to support Team Jamaica?
Well, I'm telling you, it's Jamaica is very near and dear to our hearts. It's just that now for the past, I would say 20 plus years, it's been done at a bigger level, but Puma and Jamaica has always been involved as far back as we can think. We've had many athletes back from Merlin Otis era, from the beginning, early stages in Merlin's career, where we have been involved in it. Is just that for the past 20 years, 20 plus years, we have gotten in this relationship with Jamaica, and it's been a love affair that has been mutually beneficial for both entities. And we really do love working with Jamaica. We love what's happening there. I have personally seen the development, the effort, the progress that the associations has made and is continuing to make. And we are on board to help and so they can achieve their goals. And we really, really do love Jamaica. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. And as long as Jamaica will have us, we will be around.
Definitely. Danusha, I thought I would get from you based on one of the questions that I'm getting here. Commonwealth Games 2022 is around the corner. You have Tokyo 2021. Are there any adjustments that you are making now for the Tokyo 2021 Games and also in preparation for Commonwealth, which would be in your home country?
Yeah, so I've got a new Flory team, which is the choreography part. So that's really exciting for me. I think that just instills a lot of motivation in me as well to get through my routines if I'm enjoying the dance, if it's new and fresh. And then on the bars, I'm learning a skill, which I believe only about 3 gymnasts in the world have done. So it is very, very difficult. So I'm hoping I can pull it off. It's progressing every day. But yeah, with this extra year, that's enabled me to do that. Yeah, if I don't have it to the Olympics, then maybe in Commonwealth 2022. Yeah, I had to think of my year.
All right, let me ask you also, based on one of the feedback I'm getting, what big event should we expect you to be participating, or any activities that you're engaging in outside of just Olympic Games preparation that you thought fans, etc., should know about, especially in this pandemic where we're pivoting?
So before the Olympics, at the moment, there's nothing planned. The Pan American Gymnastics competition was cancelled. It was supposed to be in America, so not really sure what's happening with that yet. And then post Olympics, I was invited to the Gold Over America tour, which is headlined by Simone Biles and other gymnasts from America. And then we're going to be traveling around doing a tour there. So very, very exciting. So if anyone's in the US or able to come to the US to join us on that, I think it will be really, really cool.
Awesome. President Samuda, I think you're still there with us. I thought I'd close off with a last question for you. What assurances can you give persons watching, listening, that the Jamaica Olympic Association continues to take all their interests, bear everything that they are trying to get, all the talents that are out there, all the member associations that are there trying to get support? What assurances that you will give them now that the GOA is consistent in developing talent and will continue to support the efforts of our stakeholders?
Our business is the athletes' development. Our business is the coaches' development. Our business is the administrators' development. So when you have that trilogy, it is serious business for us. We recognize the responsibility of leadership, and leadership commands the resources, the talents. And therefore, we are going to ensure that whatever model, whatever business model, whatever corporate governance model, whatever logistic model, whatever ecumenical, intuitive model, it serves the interest of that trilogy: athlete, administrator, coach. But apart from that trilogy, we also recognize the fan base, and we have to command loyalty in the fan base. And therefore, we are in the business of developing capital in the fan base. So, Dalton, when you look at the Jamaica Olympic Association, it is an association incorporated at the Register of Companies, but it is people-driven. We are created by our constituent members. We do business with our constituent members. We live for our constituent members, and we serve them as servant leaders. That is our focus. That will always be our focus, and that will be our raison d'etre in sport.
Thank you very much for that. I thought I'd finish with Alton's question to ask. This is the one question I actually can answer. Does the GOA have an athletes commission at all? Yes, Alton. So that's the answer for it. The rest of the question, I'll have my colleague Novlet Harris. She'll send you any information on that. She does a great job on that part of it. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say thank you very much to our panelists, Christopher Samuda, who is the president of the Jamaica Olympic Association. Gary Peart had to leave us early. He's the CEO for Mayberry Investment. Danusha Francis is a gymnast and will be going to Tokyo 2021 and the Commonwealth Games 2022. Juliet Campbell is probably going to these games, but I don't think she's going to be running at these games either. But she is marketing for Puma, and today is her birthday. I'm Dalton Myers. I've been your moderator. Let me just say, on behalf of the entire team, Teth Leroy, Henry, Rashika Grant, Gracia Wilson, Sakima Mullings, Novlet Harris, and everyone here at the Jamaica Olympic Association, on behalf of my CEO and Secretary General, Mr. Ryan Foster, thank you very much for tuning in. Before you go, please don't forget we have another webinar coming up on March 31st. You really don't want to miss it. If you're on YouTube or you're not over there yet, please go over there and subscribe to our channel and follow us on all of our social media pages. We look forward to having you there and having you at our next webinar. Until next time, see you then.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.